All right, hello. We are going to go to the next video, which is about beginnings and endings and framing your story, because all these things are very important to your story. They're probably the most important part of your story. This PowerPoint is also on the website. I was going to show you, but it looks like my computer's not going so fast. So we're just going to get right into it. Okay? And just checking, see if I can write on it still. I can. Awesome. All right, sorry. All right, so where to start your creative nonfiction? I talked a little bit earlier on in another video about the difference between memoirs and creative nonfiction. And memoirs are usually a longer piece that you really don't need to get hooked into. Whereas creative nonfiction and personal narratives are, in the sense, they're a lot like short stories. They're like short stories, but they're real. And so and they're usually shorter pieces. I mean, both of the ones that you've read are, 4 pages, 4 or 5 pages, um, which are kind of short. I mean, you can have yours go on as long. I mean, it can be 5 to 10 pages. I'm okay with that. Um, and so your creative nonfiction pieces must hook the reader, and then it's called pull the trigger, and I'm doing finger quotes that you can't see. And it's got to be in the first couple paragraphs. Otherwise, you're going to lose interest in your readers. Um, I thought Hanging did a really good job of making us want to know more and keep reading. And so that's a good thing for you to do in yours as well. And if it's not, I will gladly tell you that it's not when we have one of our 3 meetings, which you would know about if you watched the other video. So, moving right along. So, the hook and the trigger, these are your definitions for these. The hook is a way to get your reader into the story. It hooks them. The trigger is a problem or conflict of your story. And it says story because you can use this for short stories as well. But technically, a narrative, which is what you're writing, is a story. It doesn't have to be action packed. In fact, a lot of your stories probably aren't going to be action packed. It just has to be catchy. It has to make you want to keep reading. And so maybe it's just a line of dialogue someone says, and it's just, why did you say that, or why did that character say that? And that makes the reader want to know more. And I'll be happy to help you out with this once you get to your second draft. Okay. So hook, way your reader into the story. Trigger is the problem, and you gotta pull that trigger quickly because you only got 4 or 5 pages, and you want to get through it. It doesn't have to be action packed; it has to be catchy. Moving on. Where to start? There's a couple places that you can actually start your story. You can have a setup. You can start in the middle, and then you can have a flash forward. And so I'm gonna go over each of these. So I don't know. You should maybe take notes. I mean, I have the PowerPoint on there for you. You're not going to be quizzed over it necessarily right now. Maybe for the short story unit, you will be. I think just taking notes just helps you understand it better. So I would do it, but this is an independent class. So next part, the setup. This is where you start with a background of you, the setting, and even the problem. It's a very easy way to get into your story, but it can also be a challenge to write for a couple different reasons. The first one is that you need to get your hook and your trigger in there. And if you're just explaining everything, it's really hard to have a hook. It can be boring for the reader, and it can make them feel stupid because it's like, why are you telling me all this stuff? Why aren't you showing me? If a big thing for me is showing versus telling, and you don't want to tell us what happens. You want to show us, and you can do that through dialogue, through description, and all that good stuff. And so, don't make the reader feel stupid, and don't bore it. Okay, so these are big no-nos. especially if you start with like a really like cliche opening, like once upon a time, or you do like a very mechanical beginning. The purpose of this narrative is that's boring. Who cares? I mean, we know it's a narrative. We're reading it because it is. So you don't have to say that. There's also the grandiose opening that you want to stay away from. All through the ages, mankind has sought to blah blah blah. Don't do that because it's stupid. I mean, yeah, you want a bigger idea, but your idea is probably not gonna be a universally big thing like that. And then also the dramatic soap opera opener, which I laugh at because I kind of do that in mine, but and the one that you guys read that was my own personal one, but it was a dream, so I let it slide. There was a knock at the door. Oh, what's gonna happen? Yeah, it's like ooh, mysterious, but it's been done a million times. Don't I mean, come up with your own stuff. Be original. Be creative. You can start in the middle. Um, this is where you start in the middle of the action. This is great for um, more action-packed pieces, but it can also work for normal pieces. In one of mine that I didn't give to you guys because it was grammatically and stuff like that, it's pretty terrible. It was written like 8 years ago, and when I was the worst writer. Um, but I just kind of started with all this dialogue, and it's just my friends and I joking around. But you have no idea what's going on because there's such inside jokes, and then I explain it later on. So I mean that's the way to start. You put the background, expository, and other details off until later on. It was in mine. It was just three guys talking, and it's like, well, where are they? Who are they? What's going on? And then I explain it later on. It can be confusing, um, but once again, don't dumb it down for your reader. Your readers will figure it out. Okay. Um, and sometimes it's just a ploy to get the reader hooked, which means have a reason for hooking them that way. Um, I wrote a short story where I have this funny opening scene between these two characters, and like everyone was like, "Oh, I love that beginning," but what was the point of it? And I was, back when I was in college, and I thought I was all that my first year at UNI. Like, oh, how dare you question my, writing ability? And then I looked at it, I was like, oh, yeah, they're right. I'm pretty terrible. And so make sure there's a reason for it. All right. Next one is the flash forward. If you ever watch like Quentin Tarantino movies, well, he does this a lot. This is if you watch Castle, a couple episodes of Castle do this, where it starts with a clip of the climax and it goes back to 16 hours before, and then they kind of build up to it again. It gives the reader a glimpse of what is to come, and this one can be even more confusing, and you gotta have a reason for it. I watch Castle a lot. If you follow me on Twitter, and and Castle does this every now and then, and it's just like, why? What was the point of doing that? And sometimes there is, and sometimes there's not. And so this one, I don't see a lot of you using this one. I see a lot of you using either one of the first two. You can try this one. I mean, I'm all for. I mean, this is why we're doing three different. Sorry, this is why we're doing three different. Drafts. Play around with it. Don't just get comfortable with something. Challenge yourself. I'm gonna challenge you. I'm gonna challenge myself when I write my own. So, try it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Then start over. I think you guys have seen that I'm pretty lenient when it comes to things, as long as I can see that there's effort being put into it. You know, I would rather give you extra time because you tried something and it failed than just because you didn't want to do it. And remember, fail, I'm gonna write this down. Fail is first attempt in learning. Okay? First attempt in learning. So I'm not saying I want you to fail because that sounds really terrible, but I do. I mean, I want you guys to try stuff. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Then start over. I mean, that's the point of writing, is to, get better and to figure out what works and what doesn't work. All right. Next thing, the ending. There are two different ways to end your story because, yeah, this is creative nonfiction, but it's also a story. Sorry, I had to get a drink. And so, every story, whether it is a creative nonfiction or a short story, has a plot diagram. And so this is your exposition right here. Rise in action to your climax, which is right here. Okay. This is the falling action and then the resolution. And if you notice, the resolution is up past the exposition because your character, which in this case is you, should have grown through your, 4 or 5 pages. It's especially true in these because this is that act of discovery where you learn something. And so it might not be your character within the story, but it might be you, the person writing it, who, gets something out of it. If you read mine, mine in the beginning was about, why am I having this dream about my dad? And I don't know why I'm having this dream. It's the weirdest dream ever. And then I think back to, what does it mean for my dad to be a water heater? And, I learn stuff and I grow as a person. And so that's something that you could do in yours as well, is grow as a person. So the climax and the resolution. The climax ties up the major conflict, which is that act of discovery, then you can end it there. Most of you aren't going to end it there because a lot of you are going to need the resolution. That it ties up loose ends and it makes everything make sense for the reader. Most of you are going to do this one, okay? But like I said, if you want to try it right here, try it right here. Don't try it. Okay. I'm going to be honest. Don't try it here. Don't try to climax just because you don't want to write a resolution. Okay? If you're going to do it this way, it's got to be done well. And I will tell you myself if it's not done well. Most of you know me well enough now to know that I don't beat around the bush. I tell it like it is. And if it's bad, I'm going to tell you that. And I'm going to tell you how you can make it better. Because that's my job as a teacher and your job as a student. Alright. So, these are the different types of endings. We got explicit, implicit, twist, tieback, unresolved. Dialogue, you're not going to use a whole lot, so I got rid of it. So you can get rid of this one. And then long view. Okay? Explicit and implicit. It ties up the loose ends. Explicit tells the reader where everything stands, so they go out of their way to tell you. And that this person went on to it's like the end of Anchorman, the first one. I haven't seen the second one. It's where all the characters at the end and they tell you what each of them does at the end. That ties everything up for the reader. Implicit is implied, which a lot of you might do. The ending is still pretty clear, but there's room for interpretation. A hanging was very explicit. Mine is very explicit. It's easier to be explicit. It really is. But if you want to try implicit, I urge you to try it, and we'll talk about it. Okay? So explicit and implicit. Twist and tieback. A twist ending resolves the problem, but does it in a way that makes the ending more exciting, which at first doesn't sound like you could do for creative nonfiction, but you could. Adam today was talking about one of his, and it's like this really bad situation. But and I said, and he said something about like, could you make it funny? And I'm like, I don't know if that situation could be funny. And he went, oh, you could be surprised. So there could be that twist there, where everyone's going into like a funeral, let's say, and like the mood of the story is sad and it's dark, and then there's all these jokes and all these stories like that are funny, and it's like the lesson is, you gotta something to do with death. I don't know. I didn't get that far, and so that could be a twist ending. I mean, it could work. A tieback. Out of these two, I just pointed to the screen. Out of these two, this one could probably be one that you could do the most. It makes a reference to the beginning of the story. For example, and this is for like a girl watches a volcano destroy a garden, and at the end, she sees a plant starting to grow from the ashes. And so it references back to the beginning of the story, or the narrative. Like in my narrative, I think my last line was "My dad is a water heater" or something like that, and it ties back to the beginning of the story. Unresolved and long view. Unresolved. I mean, maybe your act of discovery is that you haven't discovered it yet. I mean, that could be the case, and if that's the case, and this would be the one for you. There are still some questions unanswered, but but it's intended. That's the point. It's intended. So, for example, if you come in with your story and it doesn't seem like it's all the way done, and the reader the reader's supposed to know what's going on, but we don't because you didn't put it in there. That's not good. And so, if you're gonna have it unresolved, make sure it's intended. Just remember that you know more than your reader, and so you have to put it in there, so that way we know it as well. And I think that's the biggest problem with these, is that you know in your head what you're talking about, but no one else does. And then long view down here. This is where you can jump ahead or down the road, a long period of time. Obviously, none of you are going to jump ahead 20 years, but this is good for flashbacks, and this is good for, you know, a story about when you were, 6 years old, and then, you end it with you at 20, and what you learned and stuff like that. And so that could, or when you're 17, 18, and what you learned about it. And so you could do this one. Both of these could be easily done for yours, okay? And so when you're doing your outline, I'm going to be asking you, what beginning are you going to use and why? What ending are you going to use and why? And so make sure you have these answers for when we do that, when I check you off. Next one, framing your story. Your story can be framed two different ways. A plain Jane story, like the hanging was, or a flashback, like mine that I sent out to you guys was. So mine was technically a flashback, and a lot of the ones that I wrote were flashbacks. That was the way our professor liked to do them. He thought that was. I mean, technically they're all flashbacks because they're all remembrances from a while ago, but this one has a little bit different sense with it, and I'm gonna go through these. A plain story, obviously, is where you have everything you want in one neat story. It goes from point A to point B. There's just one event, and it gets the job done. That's a plain story. A hanging. It starts with the guy being led to the gallows. It goes through. He's hung. Or, back here, oh, we shouldn't kill people because they're healthy. Oh, here's the dog. Oh, he's dead. Oh, finally, he's dead. Now we can eat. Oh, here was the guy who was clinging on to his cage, ha ha ha, and we're all laughing next to the dead body. That's point A to point B. Okay. You are more than welcome to do that one. Some of your journals, um, felt like they could be one. Caitlin, I thought yours, about your first car trip would work for this one. I mean, it's one story, and as long as you have that big thing of what you learn, the bigger universal idea behind it, then it'll work for you, I think. Or that could just be one little story within a whole bunch of stories. The flashback. This is where you have one story that is separated with smaller stories that could be triggered from the main story. So point A to point B. That's where you want to go. But in here, there's point C. And so you have this little story, and then you go back to point A. And so you keep going along. Oh, there's a stuffed toy. I remember when I was 5, this happened. And then you go back to when you were 5, and then you go back. And then you keep going. Oh, another event that triggers something. Like this is, and so a lot of mine do this. I don't know. I just like this way better personally. But if you don't, then don't do it. Or if you think it's too hard, try it. Maybe it'll work for you. Maybe it won't. You won't really know until you try. And just to be clear, you can meet with me more than 3 times. If you're having trouble with like your first draft or your second draft, come talk to me. I'll help you out. I mean, I'd rather have you fail first. I mean, fail and then learn. That's why you guys keep going back to your letters to a grandchild. I want you guys to look at your writing, revise it, make it better, and because that's what creative writing is. That's what writing is. That's what learning is. It's what at your job. If you are an engineer, you spend 4 months on one, little product, and it doesn't work. And then you go back to the drawing board and you go over and over again. A lot of things are like that. It's trial and error. So, I think that's all I got for this. If you're having troubles coming up with something, if you go back to the website on the personal narrative, like we have been, there's narrative topics right here. And these could be some things that just kind of get your creative juices flowing. And so, there's some very specific ones here. Um, Remember to think about the conflicts, about the people who are involved, and the places that they're at. That way you can do dialogue. That way you can do um, imagery and all that kind of stuff. So, that's the end of this video. If you have any questions, please let me know. And have a good rest of the day.